Please give a warm welcome to Grace Ueng. Thank you so much for researching me so much. I'm impressed already. So, I understand that tonight's theme is about what Key Club can do for you to help you help in the community. Can you guys hear me? Is that good? So thank you so much for inviting me here this evening for this important time in your lives. And I understand that you all here represent some of the best at Enloe. So congratulations. You all have a world of opportunity in front of you. And how things have changed as when I was in high school, because at my high school only boys were allowed in Key Club. And girls were invited to be involved only as Key Club sweethearts. I know I'm dating myself, but I love that there are now, it seems like perhaps more females being inducted, or at least it kind of appears from a quick glance, and they appear to rule in numbers this evening, so I'm happy about the change in the last few decades. So first I'd like to talk about the theme, less is more. So over 3 decades ago, I was a senior in a public high school in Atlanta, applying to several colleges. I was a student leader involved in a very large number of activities at my school and in my community. In fact, I pulled out from my storage room my yearbook because I wanted to think through what I would share with you this evening. And then looking through it, I pulled out my senior directory here, and I know that you can't see this, but I'm the only U in the directory. And I've got this long list of activities. And I probably had the longest list of activities of any of my 300 or so classmates in my high school. And I seem to recall at that time that I thought this long list was a good thing. In fact, leading up to senior year, I kept this carefully typed up summary list. It was landscape oriented with several columns, tabbed, and this was back in typewriter days because there weren't computers. Again, I'm dating myself. And I listed all the clubs and activities that I'd held in my school and beyond, and all the awards that I had won. Now, looking back at this, I wonder if I was driven by the wrong reasons. Why was I so focused on my list accumulation, doing more and more? Was I perhaps too obsessed with obtaining admission to an Ivy League school versus simply learning for the love of learning and really wanting to help others? The good thing was that I tried nearly everything in my high school, though my one regret is that the only sport I tried was football cheerleading. Looking back, I wonder if I really dug in to follow my true passion, or was I too busy checking things off my list? Perhaps I was simply a late bloomer in figuring this all out. You name it, I did it in my school and community. I was a candy striper in the community hospital in case I wanted to be a doctor. I was in school and church orchestra and a youth symphony early in my high school career before I realized I was the exact opposite of the model Asian music prodigy and let my older sister be the musician in our family, and she went on to study at Juilliard. I also sang in our church choir, and I also realized I wasn't that talented there either, but I did enjoy the fellowship. Then there were the science fair competitions, where I studied various hypotheses with the help of my engineering professor father. And then there was math team that met so very early in the morning that I often missed getting to solve those impossible equations because I hit that snooze button perhaps one too many times. Maybe I just wasn't passionate enough about math. And then there was yearbook staff, which I enjoyed very much. I also tutored fellow high school students and those from other high schools. I was usually very compassionate as a tutor, though I do recall one student from another high school that truly didn't want to have tutoring. In fact, in one session, he fell asleep right in front of my face at the table as I was trying to teach him Latin conjugation. Can you imagine that? So I showed him the door and told him that he should go back home until he decided that he really wanted my help. I learned early on that it's tough to serve others when they don't really want to be served. As I mentioned, I was a cheerleader for 2 years early in my high school years, and I wasn't the captain because I didn't even know the rules of football. And then I served as secretary. It seemed to be the most common office I held. It must have been my strength. I was secretary of my class my first 3 years, 8th, 9th, and 10th grade, and then for National Honor Society and Beta Club, and then Latin Club too, even at the state level. Now recently, I was at a former mentee from MIT's 40th birthday party, and I ran into another MIT alum, a few years older than me and much wiser. I commented to him how MIT these days has such well-rounded students, more so than when I was there. He quickly retorted, "But if you're well-rounded, you don't make a point." Well, maybe he had a point. I wasn't the absolute best at anything in high school, but I sure did the most. I had the longest list of anyone. Perhaps I was climbing too many mountains. This plaque here says that I won second place in my region for the Elks Most Valuable Student in leadership in school, community, and church. And then when I applied to Georgia Tech, I was awarded the Presidential Scholarship, but only for tuition, not the full boat. And then I didn't get into Harvard. And at that time, I thought that Harvard was my dream school. Now, there was one club that I was the top dog. I served as president. At least I shared this opportunity with a guy. And this was our community service club. I was co-president of the junior civic team my senior year. That was the start of my heart of service taking bloom. Now, you all have in Key Club a vehicle to help you help others. Key Club opens the door for you to walk through. Now, I have been studying positive psychology for the last many months to benefit my clients in my executive coaching practice. And I want to share a simple but hopefully powerful quote for you. Travelers, there is no path. The path is made by walking. I hope you remember these two simple statements. Again, travelers, there is no path. The path is made by walking. I'm here today to share what I have learned over the years, that less can be more. This is a time in your life, true, to try many new things, and I encourage you to do that, just like I did. But I trust that you all will be faster learners than I was. It ultimately makes most sense to choose the activities in community service for which you have the most passion. And for community volunteerism, it is critical to find one or two that you have a connection with and that you are good at. Build on your strengths. I recommend this book. It's called Strength Finders. It's a tool. It has a survey tool to identify your strengths. And it comes in a version for teenagers. It comes in very many different versions for different times in your life. Now, I don't have time tonight to share with you my top 5 strengths, but suffice to say that leveraging your strengths is where you choose to serve will enable you to have the greatest impact. Now, my dad, his wisdom seems to have grown as I've grown older. And I've been told that my son, who's a freshman at Carolina, he'll think that I'm wiser decades from now. Recently, he told my son, "Nick, do the best in things you're able to do the best. Love Grandpa and Grandma. So less is more, and find your passion. Now, as you can see, I made a bit of fun of the highlights of my long activity list in high school. But there's one area that I look back at and realize that I really did enjoy. But it's something that was sort of suppressed for a while. I attended governor's honors in the field of English my sophomore year. And also throughout my high school years, I wrote for the school newspaper. Now, this interest was a bit suppressed in going to MIT. And also, being a first-generation Chinese American, it just wasn't viewed as a practical thing to write English, or write for the school newspaper. But my second job out of MIT, I decided to do what I really wanted to do. I moved to New York City, and in my free time, I freelance wrote. And I started the New Asian Times newspaper with friends from the Asian American Journalists Association. Now, this was all volunteer. We didn't make any money. And my first deadline was to report on limiting quotas for Asian Americans at schools such as Berkeley. I learned so much from this assignment. My editor, though, had to rewrite most of my novice work. It wasn't very good, but I learned, and he still gave me a co-byline. In recent years, I've had the privilege to write to benefit those in my own backyard by serving as a correspondent for the Raleigh News and Observer and also other regional publications. Now, I want to go back to MIT and share a story of my college years, since many of you are soon going to be matriculating to college in the coming months or coming years. Now, at MIT, I figured out pretty quickly, perhaps out of sheer survival, that I would not be the best student there. But I wanted to figure out how I could make meaningful contributions. So thankfully, I was smart enough to realize very quickly I wasn't going to be top in my class academically. In fact, I remember clearly in my freshman physics class, my mind was wandering because I wasn't understanding a thing that the passionate professor was explaining. I gazed across the lecture hall, and I saw a familiar face looking my way. I wondered, how do I know this quiet, serious Chinese girl's face? Well, I figured out soon after that I remembered her photo from being on the cover of Time magazine as a winner in the National Westinghouse Talent Competition, now known as Siemens Competition. And I hadn't advanced past my simple county science fair. So in identifying where I could make a meaningful contribution and difference at MIT and leverage my strengths and fill a void, I decided, hey, I'm going to give my hand at trying to be a student leader at MIT. And indeed, after putting together a platform in passionate campaigning, I was elected president of my class. I enjoyed that service role so much that I was re-elected every year thereafter. I was able to make a difference in my MIT community through this role. Originally, I went to MIT to please my father, who was a professor at Georgia Tech. Always brought me home engineering magazines for me to read. To be an engineer was a profession that was oh so practical. And MIT was considered the dream school by students of my parents' generation coming to the US from China. So I braced myself my sophomore year when I called my parents in Atlanta from Cambridge, Massachusetts to tell them some news. I decided not to declare engineering as my major, rather management science, which is the name that MIT calls business, since everything was studied from a science viewpoint at MIT. I waited expectantly, and there was a long, pregnant pause on the other end. I was a little bit scared, fearful. And then my dad slowly replied, "We still love you." I was so relieved. So I became a very voracious member of the Sloan business community, housed in a grand building far from the labs of MIT. I plunged into that world and soon realized that the undergraduates had needs that were not being fulfilled at the business school. Since we were a small major, we had to piggyback on graduate resources and often were lost in the shuffle. Not to be forgotten, I decided to team up with 2 other Sloan undergraduate classmates, and together we founded the Sloan Undergraduate Management Association, which we fondly called SUMA, to make our voices and needs heard. And from our humble beginnings sprung a resource group that still exists today. In fact, when I served on my 25th MIT reunion committee, my co-founder of SUMA and I were invited to go to the Sloan undergraduate graduation luncheon, which filled a very large ballroom in a hotel next to the Sloan School. We felt like we had made a difference that had long shelf life. And I'll talk about that sustainability factor more in a minute. It made us very happy. While at MIT, I was much more focused on where I placed my service pursuits outside the classroom, much more so than when I was in high school. I knew that my time was limited, and therefore only had time to invest in a few activities. In fact, my sophomore year, they started a new sorority, the first of its kind to provide socialization for the female students, not just the male majority. With the urging of my female friends, I pledged. But a few months into it, I decided to de-pledge. I realized I only had time to conquer so much outside the classroom, and I had gotten a bit wiser closing in on 2 decades of life learning under my belt as I was reaching the ripe old age of 20. By my senior year, I decided to take a dare and apply to 3 business schools. It was unusual to be admitted straight to business school, as most required at least 2 years of work experience. And these days, it's really closer to 5. Much to my amazement and shock, really, I was one of the 30 or 2% globally admitted to Harvard Business School that year on a deferred admit basis, meaning that I was guaranteed acceptance upon working for 2 years. So I really encourage you to find your passion, match your passion to your strengths, and then naturally and easily you will make sustained impact. Observe yourself, become self-aware, ask other people what they think of you, and realize where your true passions in community service lie. Then match it to what you are good at, your strengths. Then you will have sustained impact. I'm going to share just one example of volunteer work that I've done and loved very much in recent years. A friend at my church was diagnosed with a rare form of lymphoma just 8 weeks after the birth of her daughter. I trained and ran my first marathon with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society's team in training in her honor. If she could fight, then I could run. And as I mentioned to you, I didn't do any athletics besides cheerleading in high school, so it was time for me to have a start. Shortly thereafter, I was asked if I had interest in serving on the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society's board of directors. I so love serving on that board and helping with fundraising activities toward their goal of eradication of blood cancers. I didn't think much of it when a few years into my service, the nonprofit hosted an evening event, and they called to make sure that my son and I would be present. And there, much to my surprise again, I was presented with this plaque that was the Distinguished Service Award for valuable contributions. And I was so touched. As my volunteering for them brought me great joy, they were a gift to me, and they were giving me this plaque. And Key Club is a gift to you. When you serve in an area that builds on your strengths, it is not hard work. It comes naturally. It becomes easy and a joy to give. I mentioned a few minutes ago sustained impact. And this is something I want to touch upon in my final minutes with you. Identify a cause that you have passion and have the opportunity through length of service and commitment to make a sustained impact. No wonder that is what colleges look for. Fewer activities and those where you can deliver real results. Their formula is to see students that really want to make a difference in the world. Now this card here is one that was given to me by my first product manager at a startup that I worked for about 20 years ago. And you can't see the word, I'll read it to you. It says, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." And I'm sure many of you know that this is a quote by Gandhi. So decide, what is the change that you want to see? and then become an instrumental part of it. Recently, this former colleague that gave me this card, she started an organization called SOAR Triangle to help women entrepreneurs get advice and funding. When she asked me if I was willing to be and serve as an advisor, I immediately said yes. It's something that comes naturally to me, so it's a strength of mine, and I have a passion for it. So that's an example of what I mean, what I'm suggesting that you will do. And another point I'd like to make, one of my final points, and this is further out. I know that many of you have several years before this happens, but I hope you can remember this. I want to encourage you to think in the coming years of building service into your vocation. You can choose a vocation that incorporates service, for instance, like healthcare, or work for a company that believes in community service, where they give you time off for community hours and applaud this type of work. Or, if you have your own business, you can dedicate a part of your company to service. I have done a bit of all of this. I recently rebranded the company I started 12 years ago I started it as the name Savvy Marketing Group. I rebranded it, and now it's called Savvy Growth. Given the many nonprofits that I've served in my volunteer work, many years ago I started to be asked to start consulting for nonprofits in addition to my traditional base of corporate clients. And it just was natural. It was building on my strengths. It was combining these strengths of strategic planning, branding, leading vision, mission, key messaging workshops, and facilitating board retreats. Key areas that I now consult with nonprofits. Another area I really enjoy is working one-on-one with people to help them reach their fullest potential. I've had the privilege of coaching CEOs and their executive teams on their personal brand, their presentation skills, and on conveying their core story. I also work one-on-one with executives to help them become more self-aware, build on their strengths, and be the best that they can be. So my passion is to help individuals and their companies achieve their fullest potential, and that was a reason for the rebrand to Savvy Growth. So I have a passion for combining into my work serving others, and I encourage you down the road for you to do the same thing. And in high school, looking back at it, I did realize that certain things that I did like out of that long list of things that I chose to do. And I went to Governor's Honors in English, since I realized I loved to write. And when I was at MIT, I had the opportunity to give my commencement address in front of 10,000 people and realized that I loved to speak. So now, this year, my 50th year, now that I'm an empty nester, and I turned 50, I'm writing a book to touch and help more people and to speak on those topics that I write and research. And this all came about from a TED Talk that I was asked to do. And I did that at another high school. And it was on the theme of moving mountains. So I decided, to be consistent with this theme, to speak on a topic that I had written and researched on years earlier. And that was on the correlation between those who climb the 7 summits. That is the tallest summit on each of the continents, and they also start successful companies. And so out of those 7 themes out of the TED Talk came 7 themes that are now the 7 chapters in my book. It starts out, chapter 1, being you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. That's a quote by Ueng. And then there's other themes where I explore fear and failure. And then my final chapter, sorry, I gave it away, is enjoying the journey. And remember, the path is made by walking. And my final point for the evening, thanks for hanging in there, is that helping others has been scientifically proven to make you happier. And as I was preparing these remarks, I happened to receive an email from WebMD, and the subject read, 6 ways to be happier now. And one of the questions read, what does volunteering give back to you? And the choices were greater happiness and lower risk of heart attack. And the answer is both. People who give their time get both. Volunteers say they feel higher self-esteem, lower levels of depression, and are happier with their lives. Research also shows that better heart health is one of the benefits of helping others. Service is really a privilege and will make you happier and healthier person. In all the positive psychology books I've read, in my quest to be the best coach possible, all research points that helping others is a key factor to happiness. And isn't that what life is all about? So Alex asked me to speak up for a minute on maybe some examples of what you guys might do. There's an endless number of organizations that you can give your time. And you definitely don't need to start your own nonprofit. Join in on an existing one. A couple that I know right offhand that love student volunteers, and this one, the first one that I mentioned, you might have already been involved with. One is Stop Hunger Now, where you can host a meal packaging event here right at Enloe. And they are a global nonprofit headquartered right here in Raleigh. And they've been a client of mine and a privilege to serve. And their vision is the end of global hunger in our lifetime. Another is Cramden, where they host Geek Days to refurbish donated computers to give to homes that otherwise would not have access to a computer. And in closing, I'd like to make sure that you guys are held accountable and assign a challenge. It's very easy homework, actually, compared to what you do here at Enloe. I know at least a few of you have actually explored some of my YouTube videos and gone to the Savvy Growth website, so I'd love for you to visit and learn more. And my wish is for you all to achieve your fullest potential. And part of this is by helping others. You all have huge potential to make a real difference in the world, and I want to see you do that. So I'd love to stay in touch, and I'd like to hear from you. Feel free to friend me on Facebook. You can search Savvy Growth. On Twitter, I'm at SavvyGrace. You can also link into me, as I've gotten some LinkedIn requests already. And I'd like to hear from you within a week. Yes, by next Friday. I'd like to hear from you on what you think your passion is and how it matches with what your strength is and what you'd like to do in this coming year. And then nothing brings me more joy than student interns I've had or people I've coached when they tell me a year later, 2 years later, and this person, she worked for me 20 years ago and she wrote the nicest note to me. It brings me great joy. I'd love to hear from you a decade from now to hear what sustained impact that you have made in your community. Thank you so much for your time.